No. All right. Sorry for the technical difficulties. And good morning to everyone. And thank you all for being here. So before we start, just want to clarify two things. First, no, this is not a keynote speech or a talk. I just want to manage expectations. And secondly, a big shout out to the amazing organizing team. Thank you for putting together such a fantastic event. Thank you. All right, so today I want to talk about something super important when it comes to going global, which is accessibility, internationalization, and localization. So we will all look how these pieces fit together and why they are a key to creating a truly inclusive experience. So one of my first introduction to accessibility was through this statement shared by the lovely Cindy Lee during her keynote about inclusive design. So we are all just temporarily able. So this simple statement highlights that at some points in our lives, we will all need our surroundings to be a little more accommodating than they usually are. Now, how many people out there can easily read this? Maybe people at the back who are finding it a bit challenging. How about this? Maybe people who can read and understand Japanese. How about now? Maybe even a few people. I see few Indian people here. So these are all the same statements but translated to different languages, and this is Hindi, which is the official spoken language in India. Now, the point I'm trying to make is even though most of us here would consider themselves as fully able without any disabilities, you would probably have the same level of difficulty in understanding this as someone who might not be able to see at all, for instance. So now accessibility is not just about designing for a specific subgroup of people, such as people with permanent visual or motor challenges. It's about designing for everyone, including our future selves. So we have to consciously build products and experiences that empower every individual, ensuring inclusivity for all. A little bit about me. So my name is Sahil, and I work as a front-end tech lead for my career in Tokyo, Japan. And I'm originally from India, have been based in Japan for over 5 years now. If you use Twitter or X, you can scan this and come say hi to me. Alright, so moving on, I'm pretty sure like all of us here have heard various definitions of accessibility. So I really love this particular definition. It helps to convey that knowing the users is the key. So you understand their capabilities, their constraints, and design for when designing or creating for them. So and work towards the technology from there onwards and not the other way around. So when discussing about disability, we often limit our thinking to something that is permanent in nature. For instance, someone who cannot see or cannot speak at all. With that, we overlook and exclude a significant number of individuals. So what do I mean by that? Let's try to relate to that. So someone who can't touch, for instance, we only often consider someone who might have one arm, for instance. Uh, what we often knowingly or unknowingly neglect is any form of temporary disability, such as someone recovering from an arm injury, or a situational disability, such as a new parent, for instance. Now, the similar concept can be extended to individuals who can't see. We often ignore someone who might be recovering from cataract or someone just stepping out on a lovely sunny day. Okay, now moving on, talking about a little bit about internationalization or IED. So in simple terms, it refers to the architecture of your application or product. So it can easily be adapted to any culture, region, or language. So since most of us here love JavaScript, for this talk, let's try to focus on how this can be achieved using React JS. So now there are a few React libraries out there that can help us achieve the internationalization architecture in our applications. So if you are interested, I would highly recommend you to check these out. Okay, so talking about localization. So while internationalization is more focused towards the architecture of the application, localization focuses on actually adapting your experience or your application to a particular culture, region, or language. So now there are various aspects of localization, some of which I try to list here. Please bear in mind that these are not all inclusive. We have text translation, text expansion, bidirectionality, data type formats, currency conversions, and so on. So now looking a little bit more into text translation. So there are a bunch of ways you can maintain translation in your services. One common one is like this, to use a JSON key value pair. I think most of us have experienced this before. So there are also some amazing translation management systems that can be utilized to maintain these strings, such as we have the phrase and localize services. I would recommend you to look into these if you are interested. So now there are various ways in which these translations can be made available in your React code bases or applications. Like we previously discussed, we have libraries such as React IAC Next that can help you achieve that. But for the sake of understanding, there's another way. You can also create a translation context provider such as this and try to wrap it around your pages of the application. And this basically exposes a use translate function that can be utilized in your components, like this, for instance. So it's quite a simple call to use translate function, and you can pass in a specific key and get the translation for that particular key. Okay, now talking about another important aspect of localization, which is date and time formats. Everyone loves dates and times, especially when working with JavaScript here, I imagine. Uh, as you may know, date and time formats are significantly different from region to region. For instance, this is how a date is written in Japan, while this is how it's written in India and in the United States. You see how this can be really confusing to users if your application is not supporting proper localization of date and time formats. Now, there are also various libraries out there that can help you achieve the localization of dates. Please check them out if you're interested. Okay, let's talk about Disney. So there's a fascinating detail in the Inside Out movie. So I'm pretty sure like most of us here might have seen Inside Out. So in one of the scenes, Riley, the main character, doesn't like the vegetables offered to her. So in the US version, which is on the left of the screen, the vegetable is broccoli, which many American kids tend to dislike. But in the Japanese version of the same movie, it's replaced with green bell peppers. Because in Japan, kids generally don't mind broccoli, but they often tend to dislike green bell peppers. So this small change is an excellent example of how localization and adapting your content to a specific region to align with a specific cultural preference can play a key role. So it's simple yet powerful way to ensure your story connects deeply with the audiences around the world. Now, both internationalization and accessibility rely on separation of concerns. So, however, it's not enough just to adapt to a specific region with internationalization or ensure accessibility in isolation. So, to create a truly inclusive experience, it's crucial to address the intersection of these two areas. So, this is where I believe that the complexity lies. For instance, consider an application primarily designed for the Japan region, which is trying to expand globally. The needs of an elderly user in Japan would significantly be different from a blind user, for instance, in Spain or in India. So now the intersection of these two areas can feel complicated, but this is where I believe analyzing key user scenarios in your application become essential. So the user needs differ widely based on the demographics, and understanding how these intersect can drastically change the number and type of user scenarios that you need to consider. So the bottom right corner I try to visualize here is the intersection, and it shows the number of possible scenarios that can be generated when thinking about the intersection. So it's quite easy to get overwhelmed with this, but what you can do is start with the most critical scenarios, as I said, such as in your application or service, signing up for a new account or purchasing a new product can be a critical scenario. And try to focus on making those scenarios truly inclusive. So this approach ensures that addressing the most critical and impactful areas first, while building a foundation for a broader inclusivity. That will be all from my side. Thank you all for being an amazing audience.